Since 2016 and since Bernie's kind of rise to prominence among the center left of the Democratic Party, there's been this talk from the center right and particularly the center of the Democratic Party about we have to vote for the lesser of two evils should your preferred candidate not win in the primary. And I think that it's kind of bled over this election into saying things like party unity are really important, or party unity is really important, and we should, particularly the left, should focus on coming together rather than all these kind of spats between Bernie and Warren that have happened this past couple of weeks, in this past month. But I think this betrays a lack of understanding for the primary process, as well as an ignorance of the past 50 or so years of American history that should serve as a lesson about why you shouldn't vote for the lesser of two evils in a general election should the candidate that you support lose in the primary. And I want to talk about that today. All right, so the first problem with this is that as it stands today, again, the day before the Iowa caucus, it looks like this election is pretty much down to Bernie and Biden as far as the primary goes. There are some candidates who are looking to spoil things in the early states, like Elizabeth Warren and Mayor Pete are kind of hanging on and hoping for, third or second place would be probably best case scenario for either of them. But I think they're going to need a significant amount of momentum from both of those states in order to carry their campaign on through these early states onto Super Tuesday and stuff. And then you have guys like Bloomberg, who is just blanketing Super Tuesday states with hundreds of millions of dollars of ad buys. And because his plan is to kind of hold off until then, see who has the most momentum, and then just kind of enter as a direct challenger to them. And his stated intention is, I think, the same this election cycle as it was in 2016, where he threatened to run as spoiler to Bernie. And I would look for the same thing to happen here if Bernie is in a clear lead, which polls show it's very possible after these first four states. If Bernie's in a clear lead heading into Super Tuesday, you can look for the anti-Bernie sentiment of the Democratic Party to kind of begin to coalesce around Bloomberg, because he has the money necessary to stay in the race as long as it takes. But the point is that right now, it looks like it's between Bernie and Biden. So, the future notwithstanding, this is what I'm going to talk about. Biden is the best you could say about Joe Biden is that he's a center-right Democrat. He has a checkered history as regards to his decisions of, civil rights and things like that. He opposed busing back in the 80s. He wrote the crime bill that landed Hillary Clinton in a lot of hot water when she kind of coined the term the super predators, describing black teenagers. He eulogized Strom Thurmond, who, if you don't know who that is, you can Google it. I'll leave some bits up on screen here. You can get some. You have an example about Strom Thurmond's past. But Joe Biden is not the kind of guy I want leading the country, and I understand that's an opinion, but it's an informed opinion. And most importantly, he can't beat Donald Trump. I think that you can look at national polls and things like that show Biden at best slightly better than Trump, if not in a dead heat. I think that after Hillary's defeat, it should become more aware to people in the center that this kind of brand of status quo politics was not really gonna cut it anymore. It's as far as winning elections goes, and so this is their stated intention on the center is we just want to beat Trump, because to them Trump is the final boss of the video game that politics is to them, and if we beat him, everything will simply just be fine. This is a fallacy, especially when you consider the past 50 or so years of American history. The problem with a centrist president from the Democrats is that the Democratic Party has long been viewed as the left party. And when the left of American politics slowly moves toward the right, which has happened since FDR, you can look at, after FDR, you had guys like Truman into JFK, and then after JFK's death, this is kind of really when it started accelerating toward the middle, with guys like LBJ, Ford, Carter, etc. And the problem is that if you look between these centrist presidents, you get guys from the right that are accelerating further to the right. So after LBJ, you had Nixon, which led into Ford and Jimmy Carter. After Carter, you had Reagan, and Reagan represented a significant jump to the right from Nixon. After Reagan, you had H.W. Bush, which this is kind of the beginning of the kind of neocon position as far as global war goes. Is kind of where this whole thing started with Gulf War and stuff like that. After H.W., you have Bill Clinton, the epitome of the center, basically. And I think that the 90s are kind of when the centrist position of just keep everything exactly as it is now and we'll be fine. I think that's when that started, in the 90s with Clinton. And after Clinton, you had W. Bush, which only accelerated this kind of neocon foreign policy position with, the Iraq War, obviously. After W, we had Obama, just another centrist, keep everything the same. Meanwhile, he started adopting a lot of the neocon positions as far as foreign policy is concerned, and was responsible for killing more people in drone strikes than any other president before him in history. And a lot of that has to do with the technological advances that led up to having drones, but you cannot, can't argue with the fact that Obama is one of the most bloodthirsty presidents we've ever had. But he was still a centrist as far as everything else is concerned. Had to be convinced about gay marriage, etc., even though that was a victory in the Supreme Court that was kind of, attributed to him. I think that's unfair. But after Obama, of course, here we are today with Trump. And so the idea that if we were to just elect Biden, everything would just suddenly get better, I think is a fallacy. And I think what would be more likely to happen was that as this Overton window shifts more and more to the right, which is the distance between the ideological right in the country and the ideological left. And when I say the ideological left, I mean the image of the left. Is this window shifts more and more to the right, which it has been. It's just history. It has been historically, creeping more and more to the right. If we keep allowing this to happen, what's going to happen after Biden, either in 2024 or 2028, is we're going to get a guy like, Tom Cotton, just out and out fascism and stuff like that. So I could make another video about Tom Cotton, I guess. But anyway, the point is that the more we kind of stray from stretching the window, which is bad. It's not what we should be doing. But for the time being, if the left exerts enough ideological pressure on the ideological center of the Democratic Party, which is what happened after 2016, after Trump won, the left of the party exerted enough ideological pressure to stretch that window further to the left. And it's very obvious looking at accepted positions today in this election cycle compared to 2016. Most of Bernie's ideas in 2016 that were looked at as kind of pipe dreams are now just widely accepted and held by many of the candidates that would otherwise be centrist. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to say that should Trump win again, I'm going to fall into the same trap that Slavoj Žižek did when he said that he basically had this exact argument in 2016 about how he thought a Trump presidency would kind of spur the Democratic Party to move to the left and kind of embrace this slightly more radical tradition among U.S. leftists. He was right, obviously, which is evidenced by, like I just said, the widespread acceptance of Bernie's policies from then. And again, Bernie is very much a moderate as far as the left is concerned. It's not out of their own possibility to say that if Trump were to win again, the movement would only get stronger, as opposed to just looking, historically speaking, at the past, since World War II. Every time the Democratic nominee for president has won and has been a centrist, the following president has been further ideologically to the right. So it's because the Republican Party exists to win elections. That's all they exist to do. They will ideologically do anything they can to win elections. So they realize that what they can do is continue to pull to the right because Democrats aren't putting up any opposition. They just don't seem to understand that the less resistance they give and the more concessions they make to the right, the more kind of reaching across the aisle stuff that they do, the easier it becomes for the right to yank the entire country, with them, ideologically speaking. Okay, so I think this has been a pretty good primer, no pun intended, for why this idea of, voting strategically to make sure the guy who isn't Trump wins. This is the orange man bad philosophy, is what I'll say. Trump is bad. I don't need to say it. Especially when you consider the events surrounding his impeachment trial, where just recently the GOP kind of voted to just totally undermine our democratic process in refusing the. Hi, I was recording.
Oh, recording.
I'm still recording. So, as I was saying, by voting to not allow witnesses into the kind of ongoing impeachment trial in the Senate, GOP senators, refused popular sentiment, which a majority of people in the country supported having at least witnesses in the trial, which is kind of common sense. It kind of goes against everything our rule of law has ever stood for here in the U.S. But it's become clear now that especially what the Democratic Party needs in this primary season is a candidate who's gonna not kind of lightly step to the left. We need to shove to the left, and the only candidate who offers